Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
In the fall of 2019, a teenage girl named Emily was invited to a sleepover at her best friend Rachel's house. They were both 17, seniors in high school, and it was supposed to be a simple Friday night of movies, junk food, and gossip. Rachel's parents were out of town, and Rachel had promised it would just be a few close friends, nothing crazy. Emily almost didn't go because of the creeping feeling she got when she pulled up to the house. Rachel's family had just moved into this old rental on the edge of town, a pale blue house that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. She brushed it off as nerves and went inside. There were 4 girls in total: Emily, Rachel, Sophie, and Dana. They stayed in Rachel's room on the 2nd floor, eating pizza, scrolling through TikTok, and watching horror movies. Around midnight, after one too many scary movies, Dana suggested they do something real, like a summoning game she'd seen online called The Whistler. According to Dana, you had to stand at the end of a dark hallway, whistle a specific tune 3 times, and then knock on the last door. Supposedly, it invited something to show itself, though no one could agree on what. Emily was uncomfortable. She wasn't superstitious, but something about the house made her skin crawl. The walls were paper thin, the floors creaked with every step, and the whole place smelled faintly like mildew and something metallic. But Rachel and the other girls begged, and Emily didn't want to be the boring one, so she went along with it. They chose the attic door at the end of the upstairs hallway. It was a short, narrow corridor with a flickering ceiling light and yellowed wallpaper that was peeling at the seams. Dana was the first to do it. She stood in front of the attic door, whistled the eerie 3-note tune, knocked 3 times, and ran back giggling. Nothing happened. They laughed it off and took turns, until it was Emily's turn. She felt like her throat was closing up as she walked down the hallway. Her body felt heavy, her instincts screaming at her to stop, but she forced herself to whistle. The sound echoed strangely down the hallway, like it was swallowed up by the wood of the house. She knocked 3 times, her knuckles feeling raw against the cracked paint of the attic door. As she turned to leave, she swore she heard movement, like something dragging across the floor above. Back in Rachel's room, everyone was on edge, trying to shake off the nerves. The laughter was a little more forced. Then came the first thump from the attic. Everyone froze. They listened, the TV muted. Another thump, louder, followed by what sounded like slow, deliberate footsteps. Rachel tried to play it off, saying it was probably an animal, but they all knew there was no way a raccoon or squirrel could sound like that. The sounds didn't stop. They got closer, heavier, until they were right above Rachel's room. Then came the knocking. 3 distinct knocks, directly on the ceiling above where they sat. Emily's heart was pounding so loudly she thought she'd faint. Rachel, trying to be brave, grabbed her phone and said she was going to check it out. Against their protests, she stormed out of the room. They heard her climb the narrow attic stairs, the door groaning as it opened. There was silence for about 30 seconds, then Rachel screamed, a raw, guttural sound that didn't even sound like her. The rest of them bolted out of the room, calling her name. They found Rachel standing at the top of the stairs, her face pale, her hands trembling. She kept saying, "There's someone up there. There's someone up there." They called the cops immediately. When the officers arrived, they searched the attic thoroughly. At first, they found nothing. Then one of the officers discovered a small, hidden compartment in the attic floorboards. Inside was a filthy sleeping bag, fast food wrappers, and a rusty kitchen knife. It turned out a man had been living in the attic for who knows how long. He was gone by the time police arrived, but they later discovered pry marks around the back basement door. The next morning, Emily's mom picked her up, and Emily swore she would never go back to that house. 2 days later, the landlord called Rachel's parents to inform them that the previous tenant had died under suspicious circumstances. He was found locked in the attic after disappearing for weeks. Nobody knew how long the man had been living up there, or why the knocks only started after they played the game. But Emily knew one thing. Something had been watching them that night, and the game hadn't summoned anything. It had simply let it know they were awake.
Story number 2.
In the summer of 2017, a 16-year-old boy named Tyler went to a sleepover at his friend Marcus's house. Marcus lived just outside the city, in a quiet neighborhood with identical houses lined up in rows. It was supposed to be a fun night: video games, junk food, and horror movies. Tyler had been to Marcus's house before, but this was the first time they'd be staying up in the converted attic room. It had slanted ceilings, a single dusty window, and creaky wooden floors. It wasn't exactly cozy, but it was private, and that's what mattered. It was around 1:30 in the morning when the power went out. Total darkness swallowed the attic, except for the faint glow of Marcus's phone. They figured it was just a brief outage, but when Marcus tried to check the power company's website, there was no signal. Tyler brushed it off, but something about the sudden silence made him uneasy. No hum from the refrigerator downstairs, no distant cars from the street. Just dead, thick silence. They decided to go downstairs to grab some candles. As they stepped into the hallway, the air felt unusually cold. Tyler noticed something strange. The bathroom door was open. Marcus always kept it shut because of his younger sister's habit of leaving wet towels on the floor. Marcus shrugged it off, but Tyler couldn't shake the feeling they weren't alone. In the kitchen, they fumbled around in the dark and finally managed to light a few candles. That's when they both heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the attic. Heavy, dragging steps. They looked at each other, confused. They'd both been in the kitchen the whole time. Marcus called out, thinking maybe it was his sister or his parents playing a prank, but there was no answer. Then came the sound of the attic door slowly creaking shut. Tyler's heart started racing. Marcus grabbed a flashlight from a drawer, and they made their way back upstairs. The attic door was closed. Marcus pressed his ear to it and whispered, "Do you hear breathing?" Tyler leaned in. Faint, but definitely there. Heavy, strained breathing, like someone was hiding just beyond the door. Marcus locked the attic door from the outside and backed away. They went to wake up Marcus's parents, but the house was cold, quiet, and empty. A note on the kitchen counter said they had gone to visit Marcus's grandparents unexpectedly. They were supposed to be gone until Sunday. That was when Marcus realized the front door was wide open. They called the police. Officers arrived within 15 minutes, did a full sweep of the house, and when they unlocked the attic door, they found fresh, muddy boot prints leading to the far corner, behind some storage boxes. Stuffed into the corner was an old, broken vent cover, wide enough for someone to squeeze through and access the crawl space between the walls. The officers followed the space and found a narrow opening behind the coat closet downstairs. The door had been rigged with a small hook, allowing someone to open and close it from inside the walls. No one was inside by the time police searched it, but they found remnants: crumpled food wrappers, a filthy blanket, and what looked like a cheap burner phone with the battery ripped out. The scariest part was the camera. Hidden in the vent that looked down on the attic room, someone had installed a small, battery-powered camera aimed right where Tyler and Marcus had been hanging out. The last recording on the device showed Tyler and Marcus earlier that night, laughing, playing games, and then, a few hours later, a shadow shifting in the crawl space behind the vent, the faint sound of the attic floor creaking, and a low, raspy whisper, "Don't make a sound!" Tyler never slept over at anyone's house again.
Story number 3.
A group of 5 friends, Mia, Zoe, Liam, Ava, and Noah, decided to have a weekend sleepover at Zoe's parents' cabin deep in the woods. It was an old place, isolated with no cell service and only a single unreliable generator for power. The plan was simple: spend the night telling scary stories around the fireplace, roast marshmallows, and enjoy the quiet away from the city. As night fell, the woods grew impossibly silent. No insects, no wind, just a heavy, suffocating stillness. Around midnight, they decided to play a game called Hide and Seek in the Dark. The rules were simple. One person hides somewhere in the cabin or just outside, and the others count to 100 before searching. Noah volunteered to hide first. The others closed their eyes and counted slowly. When they opened them, Noah was nowhere inside the cabin. They searched every room, every closet, but he was gone. They called his name, but only the echo of their voices responded. Panic started to set in. The generator sputtered and died. plunging them into total darkness. They fumbled for flashlights and phones, but none had a signal to call for help. Zoe suggested maybe Noah had gone outside. They stepped out into the cold night, flashlights cutting through the dense trees. Suddenly, a whisper floated through the woods, too soft to understand but unmistakably human. The beam of Liam's flashlight caught something moving between the trees, just out of reach. They called out again, but Noah didn't respond. Ava felt a sharp chill and suddenly froze. She pointed behind them, where the faint outline of a figure stood at the edge of the tree line. It wasn't Noah. It was taller, unnaturally still, and its eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Terrified, they ran back inside and locked the doors. Hours later, just before dawn, Noah stumbled back into the cabin. He was pale, disoriented, and his clothes were torn. He couldn't explain where he had been or what happened. The only thing he remembered was a whisper in the dark saying, "You can't leave." The next day, when they tried to leave, the car wouldn't start. They found strange symbols carved into the bark of every tree surrounding the cabin, fresh and raw. Even more unsettling, the footprints around the cabin were not just theirs. Some were too large, too distorted to be human. They never spoke of that night again, and none of them ever returned to the cabin. Noah's parents later found a video on his phone recorded during the night. The footage showed Noah wandering alone in the woods, turning his camera toward a shadowy figure standing motionless behind a tree, watching him silently. Just before the video cut out, Noah whispered, "Please don't come closer." The woods around that cabin have remained empty ever since.
Story number 4.
It started as a normal Friday night, a sleepover at my best friend's house, just the two of us. We were 14, full of excitement, sharing stories and laughing about silly things. Her parents were out of town, so we had the whole house to ourselves. It felt like freedom. We set up a blanket fort in the living room, complete with snacks and flashlights. As the night deepened, we told scary stories, each trying to outdo the other. I don't know when exactly things started to shift, but there was a strange heaviness in the air, the kind that makes you suddenly aware of every tiny sound. Around midnight, we decided to turn off all the lights. The darkness inside the fort felt like a bubble, cozy but isolating. We whispered about urban legends and dared each other to peek outside the fort. That's when I noticed the old tall mirror near the hallway. It wasn't there when I last visited her house, or maybe I just hadn't paid attention before. It was weirdly out of place, as if it had been moved in just that day. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crawled out to look at it closer. The mirror's surface was cloudy, but I swore I saw a faint flickering figure standing behind me. I spun around quickly, heart hammering, but there was no one. When I looked back, the mirror was clear, just reflecting the empty hallway. I shook it off and went back into the fort. The rest of the night was tense. We kept hearing noises, soft thumps, creaks from the floorboards, and sometimes a whisper that seemed to come from nowhere. My friend insisted it was just the house settling, but I couldn't shake the feeling something was watching us. At around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text, but I hadn't taken it out. It was a message from an unknown number, just one sentence: "You shouldn't be here." I showed it to my friend, and she laughed nervously, saying it was probably a prank. But then her phone lit up with the exact same message. Neither of us knew that number, and the text kept coming every few minutes, growing more urgent and sinister. Then the power cut out. The entire house plunged into darkness. Our flashlights flickered and died. We were trapped in total blackness. The only sound, our shallow breathing and the distant, unidentifiable noises creeping closer. We huddled together, whispering prayers and trying to calm down. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut with a force that shook the whole house. We screamed and ran toward it, but it wouldn't budge. My friend fumbled with her phone's flashlight, and that's when we saw it. Words scratched deeply into the wall beside the door, glowing faintly in the dark: "Leave before dawn." We spent the rest of the night trying every window and door, but nothing opened. The air grew colder, and shadows twisted unnaturally around us. At one point, I swear I saw hands press against the inside of the mirror, as if trying to escape. Dawn never felt so far away. When the first light crept in, the house suddenly felt normal again. The mirror was just glass, the door unlocked, and our phones back to normal, with no trace of the strange text. We left without a word, never returned to that house, and never spoke about what happened that night again. But sometimes when I'm alone, I catch a glimpse of a flickering figure in mirrors, and I remember those words carved into the wall, "Leave before dawn." Some sleepovers should never happen.
Story number 5.
It started as a typical sleepover, a handful of friends gathered in a small suburban home, the air thick with laughter and whispered secrets. The group had planned it for weeks, a night of movies, snacks, and silly dares. But as the night stretched on, things began to shift. At first, it was subtle. The lights flickered once or twice, but the old house had that habit sometimes, especially when the wind picked up outside. The friends shrugged it off. Then came the strange sounds. Faint scratching from inside the walls, soft but deliberate, like nails dragging slowly across wood. No one wanted to admit they heard it, but it was impossible to ignore. They tried to distract themselves with a horror movie marathon, ironically enough. As the clock edged toward midnight, the power suddenly went out. The whole neighborhood plunged into darkness, swallowed by an eerie silence that seemed to press in on the house from all sides. Using their phones as flashlights, they huddled together in the living room. One of the girls joked about the blackout being perfect for a seance, and in a mix of nervous laughter and curiosity, they began to play a makeshift game, asking questions to whoever might be listening in the dark. At first, it was silly, but then the air grew heavy. Their questions went unanswered until a chilling message appeared on one of their phone screens. "I see you." No one had typed it. The phones flickered one by one, showing cryptic messages. "Why are you here?" "You shouldn't be." The girls' laughter died in their throats. Suddenly, a cold draft swept through the room, snuffing out their phone lights. Panic set in as the scratching returned, louder and closer, now accompanied by faint breathing that wasn't theirs. They scrambled toward the front door, but it was locked tight, and no one remembered locking it. In the pitch black, whispers circled around them, whispering names none of them recognized. They tried shouting, calling for help, but their voices seemed swallowed by the darkness itself. One girl felt a cold hand brush against her shoulder, but when she spun around, no one was there. Then came the pounding, like someone running up the stairs, fast and relentless. The ceiling above them creaked, and suddenly the house groaned as if it were alive and angry. Their phones blinked back to life, each showing a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2. Then all screens went black again. The door finally creaked open on its own, revealing the quiet, empty street bathed in moonlight. They ran out, gasping for air, never looking back until they reached the safety of the nearest neighbor's house. The next morning, they called the power company. No outages were reported in the area. The house, they learned, had a dark history. Years ago, a young girl had disappeared without a trace during a sleepover. No one ever found her, and strange noises had been reported by neighbors ever since. They never returned to that house. But sometimes, when the night is darkest and the wind whispers just right, they swear they still hear faint scratching at the walls and the unmistakable sound of someone breathing right behind them, even when no one's there.
Story number 6.
Back in 2017, in a quiet little suburb in Wisconsin, a girl named Tara was invited to a sleepover at her new friend Emily's house. Tara had just transferred schools, and this was her first invitation, so naturally, she was excited. Emily lived in one of those older two-story homes on the edge of a small forest, the kind of house with creaky floors and drafty windows. When Tara's mom dropped her off, she got this strange feeling in her chest, but shrugged it off and forced a smile. That night, it was just Tara, Emily, and another girl named Grace. The three of them made popcorn, watched scary movies, and told creepy stories until around midnight. Emily's parents stayed upstairs, leaving the girls in the large living room on the first floor. Eventually, they decided to turn off the TV and play hide and seek in the dark, using only their phone flashlights. At first, it was just harmless fun. Emily counted to 50 while Tara and Grace scattered. Tara hid in a hallway closet near the back of the house. It was cramped and smelled like mothballs, but it had a tiny crack in the door so she could peek out. She watched Emily pass by a couple of times, but managed not to get caught. About 15 minutes into the game, things started to feel off. Tara kept hearing footsteps, heavy ones, coming from the upstairs hallway. The thing was, Emily was downstairs and Grace was supposedly hiding. She thought maybe Emily's dad was walking around, but the footsteps were slow, deliberate, and much heavier than what she had heard earlier in the night. Then her phone buzzed. It was a text from Grace. "Did you go upstairs?" Tara responded, "No, you?" Grace texted back almost immediately, "No, Emily is in the kitchen. I just saw her." Just then, the footsteps stopped directly above Tara's hiding spot. She looked up and saw a faint outline through the ceiling vent, like someone was standing right above her, not moving. Tara's stomach twisted. She eased the closet door open, creeping into the dark hallway. She made her way towards the kitchen, and as she approached, she could see Emily and Grace standing there, their faces pale, eyes wide. Grace's voice was barely a whisper when she said, "I saw someone walk down the upstairs hallway. I thought it was you." Emily was shaking. No one's supposed to be up there. They stood there frozen for what felt like forever before Emily decided to call her dad. He came down confused, but as soon as they explained, his face changed. He told them to stay put and grabbed a metal bat from the garage before heading upstairs. 10 minutes went by, then 20. No sound, no movement. Finally, Emily's dad came back down, but his expression wasn't relaxed. He told them they needed to leave the house, now. The girls scrambled outside, clutching blankets and phones. Emily's dad called the police from the driveway. When they arrived and searched the house, they found evidence that the small attic access panel in the upstairs hallway had been tampered with. There were dirty footprints along the upstairs carpet leading from the attic hatch to the guest bedroom, where the closet window had been unlatched from the inside. But it got worse. When the police climbed into the attic, they found food wrappers, empty water bottles, and a pile of blankets shoved into a corner. Someone had been living up there for at least a few days. They never caught the person. But what sent chills down everyone's spine was what they found taped to the inside of the attic hatch door. Polaroid pictures of the girls from earlier in the evening, taken through the small air vents while they were watching movies and playing games. Tara never went back to that house again, and for weeks she had trouble sleeping. Every creak, every shift in the shadows made her heart race. Even years later, just the sound of footsteps above her ceiling would send her straight back to that terrifying night.
Story number 7.
Kayla was 17 when it happened, and to this day she refuses to stay overnight at anyone's house. It was supposed to be a normal sleepover, just her and 3 friends from school, Lena, Chloe, and Maddie. Lena's house was in the outskirts of town, down a narrow, winding road surrounded by woods. Her parents were away for the weekend, and that meant the girls had the house all to themselves. Movies, junk food, gossip, the usual. But by midnight, things took a turn. It started when Chloe suggested they play a game she found online called Listening Game. The rules were simple but creepy. You all sit in a circle, blindfolded, and one person walks around the group whispering things. If you hear something that sounds wrong, you have to say stop. The others didn't think much of it, but Kayla felt uneasy the moment the lights went out. Still, she played along. Lena was the first to walk around, whispering harmless things like, "I know your secrets," or "I see you." Then Chloe, then Maddie. Each time it was giggles and silly comments. When it was Kayla's turn to be the walker, she circled the blindfolded girls, whispering nonsense. But that's when she heard something. Another whisper, close to her ear, too close. A deep male voice said, "You shouldn't be here." She froze in place. She whipped off her blindfold, but the room was still in complete darkness, and she could only make out the outlines of her friends sitting still, all blindfolded. Her breathing quickened. "Who said that?" she asked, her voice shaky. The girls all removed their blindfolds and turned on the light, confused. They swore they hadn't said anything. Kayla felt embarrassed, like she was imagining things. They moved on to movies, though she couldn't shake the chill that had crept up her spine. Around 2 a.m, Maddie said she needed to use the bathroom upstairs. They waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Chloe joked she'd probably fallen asleep in there, but Kayla grew nervous. Lena went upstairs to check. Seconds later, they heard her screaming. Kayla and Chloe rushed up and found Lena standing in the hallway, pointing to the bathroom door. It was wide open, the lights flickering, but Maddie was gone. Just gone. They checked every room upstairs, calling her name, their voices cracking from panic. Nothing. No sign of her. That's when Chloe noticed the attic door slightly ajar. None of them wanted to go up there, but Kayla, driven by pure dread, pulled the string to open the ladder. The attic was freezing despite the summer heat. It was empty except for old furniture and boxes. Kayla's flashlight scanned the room until it landed on something in the corner, a broken mirror leaning against the wall. Carved into the wood above it were the words, "I see you." The moment her light hit the mirror, Kayla's stomach dropped. Maddie's reflection was there, standing completely still, eyes wide, mouth open like she was screaming, but she wasn't in the room. She was trapped inside the reflection. Kayla screamed and stumbled back. Chloe and Lena saw it too. They tried calling Maddie's name, banging on the mirror, but Maddie's mouth just kept opening wider, her eyes rolling back in terror. Then, behind Maddie's reflection, something moved. A tall, shadowy figure, with long arms and a grin that stretched unnaturally wide, crept closer to Maddie's reflection. Before they could react, the mirror cracked loudly, sending a spiderweb of fractures across it, and Maddie was gone. The girls bolted from the attic, running down the stairs, grabbing their things and fleeing the house. They called the police from a neighbor's house. When the officers arrived, they searched the attic but found nothing. No mirror, no carvings, no sign of Maddie. Her phone was on the bathroom counter, screen cracked. Her parents came home to a nightmare. Maddie was listed as a missing person, but no trace of her was ever found. Months later, Kayla couldn't sleep. She kept seeing that reflection in her dreams, that grin behind Maddie. One night, just before drifting off, she caught sight of her bedroom mirror. Written in the fog from her breath were the words, "I see you." From then on, every mirror Kayla looked into, every reflection, she felt the eyes watching. She stopped staying over at friends' houses. She stopped using mirrors at all. The worst part wasn't just losing Maddie. It was knowing deep down that something followed her home, and it was waiting.
Story number 8.
It started as a typical Friday night. 5 friends gathered for a sleepover in Emma's old family house, an aging Victorian on the edge of town, the kind of place that creaks under its own weight, with long hallways and shadowy corners perfect for spooky stories. They were all 15, excited for a night of movies, snacks, and whispered secrets. As the night deepened, they told ghost stories, laughed nervously, and challenged each other to explore the basement, a dark, damp place no one dared enter alone. Emma's parents were away for the weekend, giving them the freedom to roam, but also leaving the house eerily quiet. Around midnight, after the power flickered and then died, plunging the house into darkness, things took a turn. The girls scrambled for their phones, but the signal was dead, and the flashlight apps barely helped against the oppressive blackness. A low hum seemed to fill the air, subtle at first, like the house itself was breathing. They huddled in the living room, but then strange noises started, soft tapping like fingernails against wood coming from upstairs. The tap, tap, tap moved closer, slower now, until it stopped right above them. No one wanted to look up, but Emma finally dared and saw the silhouette of a figure at the landing, just out of reach of their flashlights. "Guys, that's not one of us," she whispered, heart pounding. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. Then the tapping turned into dragging, a heavy scrape down the stairs, echoing in the cold silence. The girls screamed and scrambled for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked, tight. Suddenly the temperature dropped, their breaths visible in the freezing air. The lights blinked back on for a moment, revealing the figure now inside the room, pale, without features, standing still but somehow watching. The lights died again, and in that brief darkness, one of the friends vanished. Panic spread like wildfire. They called out her name, but only silence answered. Phone still dead, door locked, and no sign of their friend anywhere. The remaining 4 barricaded themselves in a bedroom, holding hands, whispering prayers they didn't believe in. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost all meaning. When dawn finally broke, the front door unlocked itself. They ran out, breathless, and called the police. The missing girl was never found. The house was searched from attic to basement, but no trace of her remained. Emma's family moved away days later. The house stands empty now, whispered about in town. Those who dare visit say at night you can still hear tapping on the stairs and sometimes faint, desperate cries from the darkness, like someone still trapped, waiting for the morning that never comes.
Story number 9.
It started as a typical Friday night sleepover at my best friend's house. There were 4 of us, me, Lisa, Mark, and Jenny, excited to stay up late, watch scary movies, and eat way too much junk food. Lisa's parents were out of town, so the house felt empty, but it was cozy enough to ignore the silence. As the night deepened, we turned off the lights and huddled in the living room with flashlights to tell ghost stories. That's when the strange noises began. At first, it was just a faint scratching sound coming from the basement door, which was supposed to be locked tight. We joked it was just the house settling, but the scratching kept growing louder, more persistent. Curious and a little terrified, Mark convinced us to check it out. We crept to the basement door, and when Mark tried the handle, it was unlocked. That didn't make sense. Lisa insisted her parents had locked it before leaving, but no one argued. Our flashlights flickered as we slowly descended the stairs. The basement was pitch black, colder than the rest of the house, and smelled damp and rotten. We scanned the room with our flashlights and saw nothing at first, just old boxes and forgotten furniture. Then Jenny let out a strangled gasp. In the corner, barely visible, was a crude symbol scratched into the concrete floor. It looked like a circle with strange, jagged lines inside it, almost like a ritual marking. We all felt a cold chill run down our spines. Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut behind us. We all screamed, banging on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Our flashlights flickered violently and then went out, plunging us into total darkness. Panic set in as we realized our phones had no signal, and the house seemed to grow eerily silent except for our own heavy breathing. Then a whisper echoed from the darkness, soft but unmistakable, calling each of our names, one by one, but not like a friend. It was cold, detached, almost mocking. We huddled together, terrified, trying to ignore it. After what felt like an eternity, the basement door creaked open and we scrambled out. When we got back upstairs, everything seemed normal again. The lights worked, the house was warm, and the scratching sound had vanished. But Jenny was pale and trembling, insisting she had seen something standing behind Mark in the dark, something that wasn't human. We tried to brush it off, but that night none of us slept. At exactly 3:13 a.m., every one of our phones lit up with a text from an unknown number. The message read, "You saw what you shouldn't have." We never found out who sent the texts or what the symbol meant, but after that night, none of us could sleep over at Lisa's house again. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I swear I hear faint scratching at my bedroom door.
Story number 10.
It started as an ordinary Friday night. A group of 5 teenage friends, Maya, Jenna, Kyle, Sam, and Lily, decided to have a sleepover at Maya's old house on the edge of town. The house was a little rundown, creaky, and full of shadows that danced under the dim light, but Maya's parents were out of town, so it was the perfect setting for their long-awaited night of fun. They arrived with snacks, blankets, and their phones ready for hours of laughter, ghost stories, and the usual late-night chatter. At first, everything was normal. They played games, told silly stories, and watched a few horror movies just for kicks. But around midnight, the atmosphere shifted. Jenna, the most curious of the group, found an old, dusty box in the attic. The box was covered in strange symbols that none of them recognized. Inside were worn-out diaries and strange objects, mostly old photos of people they didn't know, faded newspaper clippings about disappearances, and a small, cracked mirror. As they flipped through the diaries, they read about a girl named Eliza who lived in that same house over 50 years ago. According to the writings, Eliza was obsessed with sleep and dreams. She claimed she could enter other people's dreams and control them, but warned that sometimes the dreams fought back. The last entry was chilling. It described Eliza being trapped in a nightmare and begging whoever found the diary to never sleep in the house. Trying to shrug it off, the group joked about the spooky story and decided to test if the mirror really worked as a dream portal, as the diary suggested. They sat in a circle, holding the mirror between them, daring each other to close their eyes and fall asleep while focusing on the mirror's surface. One by one, each friend drifted off. Maya was the first to wake up, heart pounding, but she couldn't open her eyes fully. Something was pulling her deeper into a dark void where shadowy figures whispered her name. When she finally blinked her eyes open, she was alone in the room. The others were still asleep, but something felt off. Then she noticed Kyle wasn't breathing. She shook him, panic rising. His eyes shot open, but they weren't his normal brown eyes. They were black, empty, and cold. He smiled slowly, unnervingly. "You shouldn't have slept," he said in a voice that wasn't his own. Maya screamed, but the others started waking up too, one by one, their faces pale and eyes glassy. Jenna whispered, "I saw her, Eliza. She was in my dream, and she wasn't alone." Suddenly, the house grew cold. The lights flickered. The mirror on the floor shattered into pieces, and a low, guttural laughter echoed from the walls. Sam bolted for the door, but found it locked tight, no matter how hard he pushed. Lily's phone screen cracked, showing static and faint, shadowy faces that seemed to reach out from the screen. Panic set in as they realized this wasn't just a story. The nightmare Eliza wrote about was real, and now it was feeding on them. Every time one of them closed their eyes, the darkness reached further, trapping them in endless nightmares where their worst fears came alive. Hours passed like minutes. Their voices grew weaker, their eyes darker. By dawn, the neighbors found the house eerily silent. The front door was unlocked, but inside, no sign of the 5 friends could be found, only the shattered mirror and the open diary, pages fluttering in the morning breeze. The police never solved the case, but some say if you pass by that house at night and catch a glimpse through the cracked windows, you might see 5 pairs of eyes staring back, lost forever between the thin veil of sleep and waking, prisoners of a nightmare that won't let go. And if you ever get invited to a sleepover there, don't close your eyes, because sometimes what waits in the dark isn't just a dream.
Story number 11.
It started as just another sleepover at Emily's house. 4 close friends, Emily, Sarah, Lisa, and Megan, had planned the night for weeks. It was the weekend after Halloween, so the house was still filled with leftover decorations and the scent of pumpkin spice candles. The girls were excited, giggling and setting up their sleeping bags in the living room, watching horror movies and sharing ghost stories. Around midnight, the power went out. At first, they thought it was just a storm outside, the wind howling and rain tapping against the windows. Emily lit some candles, and the flickering shadows made the room feel colder. They decided to keep telling scary stories, daring each other to speak about things no one wanted to admit. Then Megan started acting strange. She kept staring at one corner of the room, whispering things under her breath. The others joked it was because of all the scary movies, but when they asked what she was saying, Megan's eyes went wide and she clammed up. Suddenly, the candles flickered violently and the air grew thick, like something unseen was suffocating them. The power came back on, but the atmosphere had shifted. The girls tried to laugh it off, but Sarah noticed Megan's face wasn't quite right. Her eyes were glassy and vacant, her smile forced. Megan said she wanted to go home, but Emily insisted she stay. That's when the noises started. It wasn't thunder or rain anymore. From the attic above, there were soft footsteps pacing back and forth, slow and deliberate. Lisa swore she heard whispers calling her name, a voice so low it felt like it was inside her head. Megan's breathing grew uneven, and she kept twitching like she was being pulled by something invisible. Trying to shake off the fear, Emily suggested they check the attic, thinking maybe a raccoon or stray animal had gotten inside. When they climbed the narrow stairs, the air grew icy cold. The wooden floorboards creaked under their weight, but the room was empty, except for an old mirror leaning against the wall. That mirror wasn't supposed to be there. Emily remembered it from her grandmother's house, a mirror her grandmother said was cursed, something the family avoided. The surface rippled like water, and when Megan looked into it, her face twisted into a silent scream. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, and shards flew like tiny knives, embedding into the walls and floor. Megan collapsed, convulsing, while the others scrambled to help her. But her eyes rolled back, and in a voice that wasn't hers, she whispered, "Let me in." Before they could react, the lights went out again, plunging the room into darkness deeper than before. When the power finally returned, Megan was gone. Her sleeping bag lay empty. the window wide open as if she'd walked out into the night on her own. The police searched, but Megan was never found. The house grew colder after that night. The attic mirror shattered, but somehow still reflecting something dark, something waiting. The other girls stopped speaking about what happened, but sometimes, when the wind blows just right, Emily swears she can hear Megan's voice whispering through the walls, begging to be let in.
Story number 12.
It happened in the summer of 2019 in a quiet neighborhood in New Jersey. The story comes from a girl named Emily, who was 15 at the time. She was invited to a sleepover at her best friend Julia's house, a large old colonial home that had been in Julia's family for generations. Emily had been there a dozen times before, but this particular night would be very different. There were 5 girls at the sleepover, and it started off normally: movies, junk food, and ghost stories. Around midnight, Julia suggested they explore the attic. Emily felt uneasy. She'd never been up there, and Julia always avoided talking about it. The others, caught up in the thrill, agreed instantly. Julia fetched a rusty key from a kitchen drawer, and they climbed the narrow stairs to the attic door at the end of the hall. The door creaked open, and the air was thick with dust. It was a cramped space cluttered with old furniture, boxes, and broken lamps. Emily's flashlight landed on a dusty trunk in the corner. The others eagerly gathered around, and Julia hesitated before saying it belonged to her great uncle, who went missing when he was a teenager. They thought it was just another family mystery. Inside the trunk were old photographs, some strange metal objects, and a faded leather-bound notebook. Curiosity got the better of them, and Julia started reading aloud from the notebook. The entries described rituals, cryptic symbols, and unsettling details about watchers in the attic who came at night. The further she read, the more uncomfortable Emily became. She urged Julia to stop, but the others laughed it off as nonsense. After an hour, they got bored and went back downstairs, leaving the notebook open on a table in the living room. They all fell asleep around 2 a.m. Emily kept waking up throughout the night, disturbed by tapping noises from the walls. She assumed it was just the old house settling, but around 3:45 a.m., she opened her eyes to see a tall, shadowy figure standing by the living room doorway. At first, she thought it was one of the girls, but the figure was too tall, its neck slightly bent, head tilted like it was studying them. Emily sat up quickly, and the figure vanished into the darkness. Her heart pounded. She nudged Julia awake, but Julia was groggy and dismissive, saying it was probably her dad walking around. Emily was too scared to sleep, and for the next hour, she heard faint dragging sounds coming from the ceiling. Around 5 a.m., she got up to use the bathroom and had to pass the living room table where they'd left the notebook. She froze in place when she saw the notebook was now closed and placed perfectly in the center of the table with a thick layer of dust around it, but no dust on top. Someone or something had moved it. She rushed back to the others, waking everyone up. Julia's face drained of color when she saw the notebook. She said she hadn't touched it, nor had her parents been downstairs all night. The moment the sun rose, Emily insisted her mom come pick her up. The other girls stayed, brushing it off as a prank. 2 days later, Julia called Emily in a panic. They'd stayed at her house again and decided to sleep in the living room. At around the same time, close to 4 a.m., they all woke up to loud thumping from the attic. When they checked, the attic door was wide open, even though Julia's dad always kept it locked after they went up there. They found deep scratch marks inside the attic walls, fresh ones, like someone or something had clawed at the wood from the inside. Julia's parents didn't believe them, saying it was probably rats or the old wood shifting. But that night, Julia swore she heard someone whispering her name directly into her ear while she was alone in her room. Emily never went back to that house. 2 years later, Julia's family sold the property after repeated complaints of footsteps, whispers, and strange figures moving past doorways at night. To this day, Emily avoids sleepovers, especially in old houses, and refuses to discuss what happened in Julia's attic because every so often, when she's lying in bed at night, she swears she still hears faint tapping on her bedroom walls.
Story number 13.
It was a typical Friday night when 4 friends, Emily, Sarah, Lisa, and Mia, decided to have a sleepover at Emily's house. They were all high school juniors, excited for a night of movies, snacks, and endless gossip. Emily's parents were out of town, which made the house feel like their own little sanctuary. They set up their sleeping bags in the living room, grabbed their phones, and started scrolling through TikTok, laughing at silly videos. But as the night deepened, something in the air shifted. Around midnight, Lisa suggested they play a game she had recently heard about online, a sort of modern-day seance called the Midnight Caller. The rules were simple. Turn off all the lights, sit in a circle, and call out to the caller. Whoever got a text message back from the unknown number had to share a secret or face a dare. The friends, slightly skeptical but curious, agreed. They turned off the lights, the only glow coming from their phone screens, and formed a circle. Emily held her phone and typed, "Midnight caller, are you there?" The seconds stretched in silence until a message popped up, "Yes." Their laughter turned nervous. One by one, they called out to the caller and received messages. Most were harmless dares or cryptic texts, but when it was Mia's turn, her phone buzzed with something chilling. "Look behind you." She froze and slowly turned. The dim shadows of the room were empty, but her heart pounded like a drum. She laughed it off, blaming nerves. But then Sarah's phone buzzed. "You're next." Panic flickered in her eyes. Suddenly, the TV flickered on by itself, displaying static, then a grainy figure appeared, barely visible, a pale face with dark, empty eyes. The friends screamed and scrambled to turn off the TV, but the screen wouldn't go black. Emily's phone buzzed again, this time with a message that wasn't from the game. "You can't leave." The power cut out, plunging the house into total darkness. The girls huddled together, their phones dead, the eerie silence pierced only by faint scratching noises coming from the walls. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, as if something was clawing its way inside. Emily's voice trembled. "We need to get out." They stumbled toward the front door, but it wouldn't budge. It was like the house itself was holding them captive. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. In the silence, they heard slow, deliberate footsteps approaching from upstairs. None of them dared to look, but a cold breath seemed to brush their necks. Then a whisper, barely audible, echoed through the darkness. "Stay." Morning came, and Emily's parents returned to find the front door locked from the inside. They called the police, who broke down the door, only to find the living room empty. The sleeping bags were there, the snacks untouched, but the four girls were nowhere to be found. The only clue was Emily's phone on the floor. Screen cracked, displaying a single message in the text thread with the midnight caller, "We never left." No one ever saw or heard from Emily, Sarah, Lisa, or Mia again. And sometimes late at night, neighbors say they can hear the faint sound of scratching and whispers coming from the empty house.
Story number 14.
It started as a normal Friday night when four friends, Maya, Lily, Sam, and Jenna, decided to have a sleepover at Maya's house. They were excited, laughing and sharing secrets as they settled in with popcorn and scary movies. Maya's parents were out of town, so the house was theirs alone for the night. The power flickered briefly just as the last movie ended, but they didn't think much of it. Around midnight, after the lights went out completely due to a sudden blackout, their phones lost signal too. They joked about how classic horror movie this felt, teasing each other about who would get scared first. They lit candles to keep the darkness at bay, the flickering flames casting long shadows on the walls. The atmosphere was cozy but tense. Then the noises began. At first, it was just faint, soft tapping on the windows, almost like a rhythmic knock. Sam tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably just tree branches scraping against the glass. But the tapping grew louder, more urgent, and now it was coming from the back door. The girls huddled together, whispering, their smiles fading. Suddenly, the candles blew out simultaneously. The room plunged into pitch black. In the silence that followed, a slow, dragging sound echoed from the hallway, like heavy footsteps moving toward the bedroom. Maya grabbed her phone, trying to turn on the flashlight, but the screen stayed dead. Jenna reached for the door handle, but it was icy cold as if frozen in place. The footsteps stopped right outside the door, and then a deep, guttural breath whispered through the crack beneath it. "Who's there?" Maya's voice trembled. No answer. Then the door handle turned slowly. They screamed as the door creaked open, But no one was there, only a dark, empty hallway. The dragging sound resumed, now moving away down the stairs. They decided to follow, creeping after the sound with their candles barely flickering. The basement door was slightly ajar, the cold air pressing against their faces. They shone their lights inside to see an old rocking chair moving back and forth, but no one was there. The floor beneath was stained with something dark and sticky. Lily bent down to touch the stains and gasped. It was dried blood. Suddenly, a phone in the living room buzzed. Maya's phone. They ran back upstairs to find her device turned on and a text message on the screen. "You can't hide." The lights came back on instantly. The house was silent again. But something was different. The air felt heavier, colder. The feeling of being watched didn't leave them. That night, none of them slept. The next morning, when Maya's parents returned, the basement door was locked from the inside. They never found out who or what was in that house during the blackout. But sometimes, late at night, the girls say they can still hear the slow, dragging footsteps and the rocking chair creaking softly beneath the floorboards.